Hello there. So I just want to walk you through my new device called Divisions. It's a MaxForLive MIDI Effect, so it's used exclusively in Ableton. So when you drop in the device, it just looks like this blank square. And it's a MIDI effect, so my instrument right now is just this marimba. Just played it. Okay. So yeah, when you open it up, it's blank and it says at the bottom, click anywhere to open. So you click anywhere and then it'll pop out the main display or of the settings. And so this is a MIDI effect, so ultimately it will put out MIDI notes to a synthesizer. So how does it do that? Just to skip forward a bit to show you, it relies on you can draw these kind of drawings, like very basic drawings, like MS Paint. And these are walls that I've drawn. And then uh, you can have, and then you create these things called emitters. So I'll just create one, and you can move them around, and you can have these shoot out balls, and when the balls hit the walls, they'll output a note. See? And if I move it here, cool. So yeah, so that's the general main concept of the device, is that you draw walls. Here's a circle of walls, and then you shoot out these balls, and when the balls hit the walls, they make a note. Let me turn this down a little bit. So yeah, that's the main concept of the device, and then everything else about the device is just cool things you can do with that. Like, for example, right now we've just hearing the same note when it hits, but what if we want the note to be different depending on the height where the ball hits? Well, to do that, I go down to these emitter settings. Here's the pitch here, and then I can modulate the pitch here. I'll choose Y, which is the Y position of the ball, and then I'll add a bit of that modulation. And then when I shoot a ball now, and for example, what if I wanted that to be only in a major scale? Then I could click this scale here, choose major, choose D for a D major. Yeah, so you can just do lots of things within that kind of situation. All right, so let me just go through the whole device now so you know everything that's going on from basically top to bottom. So you may have noticed, at the very top left, there's this plus button, and that's to add emitters, these little things that shoot out the balls. And you can have up to 32 of them. So I'll add another one. So now we have a pink and a yellow one. I can, yeah, and you can add up to 32 emitters, like I said. Next to the plus button is this disk save button, and that's if you want to save, like if I had a bunch of balls flying around, if I want to save right where they are, all their positions and velocities, to load that back up exactly the same on a preset or whatever, then you can press this save button and it'll just save all the positions of the balls. Okay, next to that are all these cursor mode tools. The left side one, the hand, this is to select and drag emitters around. And if you hold shift and drag, instead of moving it, it will rotate that little line around, which is the direction that the ball is shot out. So you can also rotate and select and drag. Okay. Next to that are all these are drawing tools for drawing walls. So the dot is a free draw, and then we have line drawings. We have the ellipses, squares. Okay, this is getting messy. Let me clear it. Squares, or rectangles, I should say. Triangles, and sine waves. Now, if you hold shift for any of these, it'll lock them to their equal counterparts. So rectangle, if you hold shift, it'll always be a square. Ellipse will always be a circle. Sine wave will just be a very pure sine. I don't know. And then if you noticed maybe here at the top right, some other parameters show up depending on the draw tool. So for a lot of the shapes, they have a rotation parameter. So if I rotate the rectangle, now we'll get our little rotated rectangle. And for the circle, we have this arc %, so I can turn that down and it'll be like a half circle. And the sine has a starting phase and cycles or a frequency option, so you can do stuff like that. You also have an eraser tool here with a size option, so you can just erase walls. And like I've been clicking a lot here, this X clears all the drawings. Okay, let's just add a circle. Oh, it's a half circle right now. Okay, so that's this whole top section. Now this section here to the left side deals with kind of triggering the different balls to emit. So this button that I've been pressing just causes a manual trigger. And below that, there's different modes for like which emitter is triggered when you trigger an emit. So right now it's on all, so when emit is triggered, just all of the emitters launch balls. But if I do like forward, it'll cycle forward through them, so it'll go pink and then yellow. So if I do it once, it's pink, a second time, yellow. And then if I do the back, it just reverses that, which is, there's just still two, so it'll go back and forth. And then we have a forwards backwards option. And then there's a random, it just chooses a random one. And then there's index. And when I click that, we can see the indexes of the emitters. And that just only triggers the emitter with this set index here. So right now, it's only going to trigger index 1 if I press it, which is the pink one. And then if I go to 2, it only triggers 2. All right. So below all that is the auto emitter, which just automatically emits a ball at a certain rate. And you can set that in synced times. If you have it in synced times, then the transport needs to be running for it to work if you have it in synced times. All right, this at the bottom, MIDI in, that says how the MIDI incoming notes trigger the balls to emit. If it's off, then they don't. Incoming note will do nothing. If it's on trig, then an incoming note will trigger it. So I'll have it off, and I'll press it. Right now, I'm just pressing this note on my keyboard, and nothing is happening. If I turn trig on now, I'll press that note. And you'll notice that it triggered a ball when I press it. Let me delete this one emitter and turn the number of hits pretty low. Okay. Now, so yeah, trig just has note on messages trigger a ball. Now hold will go a step past that. It will allow note on messages to trigger a ball, but then once the note that triggered them is released, or a note off, it will also remove the ball. So it kind of connects the triggering and releasing of balls to MIDI notes. So let me press a note. And yeah, I'm not sure if you can tell, but yeah, I'm pressing a note, I'm holding it, and then I release the note. Now I'm going to do a chord and release the chord. Yeah, and that's why these things blanked out too, because in this MIDI hold mode, you can't auto emit or manually emit or control how long the ball lives for, because it's all controlled by the MIDI notes. All right, I'll turn it off so we're back in a normal mode. All right, so that's this whole left section. This right section is several different things. We have the speed of the simulation. So I'll turn this up. Okay, you can speed it up or slow it down. You have transport lock, which locks the whole simulation. It doesn't do anything unless the transport is running, which is pretty useful. Wall dampen allows the walls to kind of slow the balls down each time they hit it. So I'll emit a ball, it's moving, but if I turn dampen up, it's just getting slower and slower every time it hits the wall. Okay, edges say what happens when the ball hits the edge of the screen. So right now it just bounces off. But you can also do wrap around. So now it's wrapping around. And you can also do delete, so just get removed when it hits it. Edge note says that when the ball hits the wall, will it put out a note? Right now it's off, so it doesn't put out a note. It just bounces around these edges. But if I turn on edge note, it will start outputting note. Okay, MIDI through, below that is MIDI through. That just means if you send in MIDI notes, they'll just get passed right through to the instrument. So if you want to gate off those notes, just turn that off. Quantize quantizes the notes that are generated by the balls hitting the walls, not the notes coming through. So if you have quantize on, yeah, it'll quantize the interval. So right now it's in free, and they're just bouncing around freely. But if I start quantizing it, it'll quantize it to, say, 16th notes, or let me do a bar. So now once every bar, the notes are being sent out. So yeah, you can just quantize stuff like that. And then kind of across the left here, there's this like little hidden parameter select. And that just allows you, like, see if I created more emitters, you can select and drag them with the mouse in the hand cursor mode. But you can also just use this box, and you can go to select them with this little box here if you want. Sometimes if they're all stacked on top of each other, this is pretty useful. Okay, now below that in this whole section here, you see the parameters for the selected emitter, and you can tell it's the selected one by the different colors. So right now we're on the pink emitter, and you can do things like delete it, so I'll delete that, and now we're on the green or now yellow emitter, and you can copy, let's say I press copy and copy this yellow emitter, and then I go to green, and I can paste. And now green has all the settings as yellow, and they're stacked on top because their positions are the same. But let me move them. Okay, so yeah, now we also have this X and Y parameter that you can also click and drag, but you can also do it here with the knobs. You can control the amount of force it has when it launches the ball. You can control the amount of friction it has, so that's like how quickly the ball will slow down. So if I trigger, let me trigger it. It's just moving, but if I turn up the friction, it's going to slow down. Similar to wall dampen, except that friction slows it down continuously instead of just when it hits a wall, which does have a different effect. All right, there's skip trigger, which says the probability or the chance amount, the amount of chance that happens. Sorry, the chance that the emitter will skip launching a ball when it's triggered. So if I were to press emit here, it's 0%, so it's always gonna trigger it. But if I go to 100%, it'll skip it 100% of the time. So now I keep pressing emit, but nothing happens. So that's just how much the chance it'll skip it. Angle is the direction it launches the ball. Okay, so now we have the ball removal mode. Yeah, so by default, it's in hits mode. So this just says the ball will be removed after a certain number of hits. So right now, after 8 hits, let me turn to 4. So after 4 hits, it's going to disappear. But you can also instead doing it in a time interval. So now after 1.6 seconds, it'll get removed. And you can also do synced time. And then there's this little X button that just removes all current balls. Okay, so then this right side deals with the MIDI note that is output when the ball hits the wall. And I showed you a tiny bit of this at the beginning. So you can choose the pitch, the central pitch, velocity, and duration of the note. Like I showed you before, you can select different scales for the note, and there's like a drums mode, which should get the pitches from the drum rack and map them. You can choose a tonic. And then, like I showed you, you can modulate the pitch. You can also modulate the velocity and the duration the same way. So your options are, I already showed you Y. So Y is like the height that the ball is modulating the pitch. So now, right now, when it's higher, it has a higher pitch, and when it's lower, it has lower pitch. If I turn this modulation amount to negative, it will just reverse that. So the lower is now the higher pitch, and the higher it is the lower pitch. So you can do this bipolar. The other modulation options are none, which is none, X, which is left to right, so more left, lower pitch, higher right, higher pitch. And this is just for pitch. I mean, if it was velocity, it would be more left, lower velocity, higher left, higher velocity, and same for duration. There's also mag, which is the distance from the center. So further from the center has a higher value. Force, so that's just like the speed or force. So, if you had wall dampen or friction on, that would mean that as it slowed down, the pitch would get lower if it's mapped to force. I mean, I guess I can just show you that. So I'll turn the wall dampen up and shoot it. Let me do it a bit more and give it a higher force. Yeah, so as it slowed down, the pitch got lower. There's also angle, so that's like the direction it's moving will determine the modulation. Index modulation, so if there was like 10 balls, each ball would have an index, like ball 0, ball 1, ball 2. So out of 10 balls, if you were ball 5, then your index modulation would be 0.5. So like if you're the first ball, you'll have a lower or higher, I can't remember. You'll have you'll have the lowest or highest modulation value. And yeah, so index works like that. Spray is just a random value. And hits only works if you're in hits mode, and that will be based off the number of hits you have. So if I have 8 hits and I'm modulating by hits, the pitch will go up or down. Let's see. Okay, it goes down. Unless you do a negative. So now it'll go up the more hits happen. Yeah. All right, now for the bottom section. Okay, and now for a very important disclaimer is that since there's 32 of these emitters, there's not actually 32 instances of these parameters. Otherwise, this device would take like a minute or more to load. So because of that, you can't actually map anything. I mean, okay, I kind of lie. Like, I'll right click and you can map things, but it won't change the individual emitters. Like you shouldn't map this and automate it, because as soon as you change which emitter is selected, it will start automating whichever one's selected. So I left you the capability to still do that in case you want to do a cool like controller setup where you change the selected emitter you have, and then you can change the values that are mapped. However, you should not try to automate these values in a normal way. You cannot map them or automate them in a normal way. Like I said, because say this X value, it's the same value for all these emitters. It just changes which one, you know, when which one is selected, it will just change which one it controls. Okay, so to get around all of that, I made you this emitter looper, parameter looper at the bottom left, and this will allow you to automate emitter parameters internally. So just to demonstrate, right now it's at 2 bars, so it will just loop on the clock by 2 bars. So if I press record, it's just looping between two bars. There's no rush to move anything. Now, if I start just moving this, say, x parameter, now let's see. Now, see, it's moving on its own within the range of 2 bars. If I move this to 1 bar, now it's just looping 1 bar of those movements. And you can do that for any parameter here. You can change the pitch, the movable mode, any of these parameters in this section, you can automate the changes of them with this emitter parameter looper. Now, if you want to start over, you can just press clear all to clear all the recordings. However, if you just want to start over, if you don't want to start over, but you just want to delete, so let's say I did these circles. These are really shitty circles. But let's say I didn't want it to move. Let's say I wanted the X motion, but not the up and down the Y. But I don't want to clear it all. You can use this clear value thing. So all you have to do is press it. Now it's enabled. And all you have to do now is move the parameter of the thing you want to remove. So I want to remove Y, so I remove it. And now it deleted the Y recordings and just kept the X. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so that's how this emitter looper, and that's also the reason it exists. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that if you hold Command or Control until all this turns white, then whichever one of these you move will move it for all the existing emitters. So right now we have 2 emitters. If I hold Control and move X, now it moves both of their X values. And if I had more emitters, it would move all of them. See, I'll add one more, hold it, and it's moving all 3. So yeah, if you hold Control and these turn white, then if these are white, then all the parameters for all the emitters will be changed. Okay. Now one of the last things is this bottom right is the attractor or repeller. So when you shoot these emitters, they're just going their own way, right? But if you add this attractor, it will actually pull the balls towards it. And you can turn up the power, or you can turn it down. And if the power is in negative values, it becomes a repeller and actually repels the balls. Yep. And it has its position parameters here, but you can also just click and drag it in the hand mode. Same with these emitters. So you can just click and drag all these. Great. So there's only one more thing to describe, and that is this other little device I included called the divisions listener. And you're supposed to throw this on other tracks to receive MIDI notes from individual emitters. So like, of course, you can just send this whole device's output to another track and get all the notes that are coming out. That's fine. But what this device allows you to do is, if you say wanted this yellow emitter notes to go to one instrument and this pink to go to another instrument and this green to another, that's what you can use this listener for. So I have this listener. Let me throw on a completely random instrument on another track. Okay, I'll just throw this. Probably won't work well, but yeah. So let's say I wanted this synth I just made to get the notes from the pink emitter. So first I select the device. There's only one device, so there's only one here. And then you can see I have the pink, yellow, and green emitter options here. So I'll choose pink, and that will go to this synth. And let me move divisions off into its own track. So by default, it's not sending to anything right now. And then I'll add another listener. I'll copy it and I'll paste it. Okay, I'll just drag and drop another one. Okay, and I'll drag it into the instrument I was doing before, this marimba. And for the marimba, we'll receive from the yellow. So the marimba will get the yellow emitter notes, and this new synth will get the pink ones. And I'll just delete this green emitter. So now, if I emitted the pink, we're going to hear that new synth. Ooh. Okay, I guess that new synth is making my CPU pretty high. Let me drop in a simpler synth since I'm recording a video. All right, we're going to do that synth. So the pink will go to that synth, and the yellow will go to the other one. Okay, and here's the yellow. Or here's them both. Well, yeah, it doesn't sound the best, but hopefully you get the idea of how that works. Okay, great. So that wraps up all the functionalities. Thanks for listening, and I hope you consider getting the device. Enjoy.